Welcome to the Rosbergs, your marriage coaches. Join Dr. Gary and Barbie Rosberg, America's family coaches, who bring 4 decades of empowering marriages across the U.S. and internationally for this podcast to equip you and your partner with encouragement and tools for a great marriage. Here now are your hosts, Dr. Gary and Barbie Rosberg.
We're the Rosbergs, your marriage coaches. And it is delightful to be back into this podcast, Barbara, and to talk about companionship and friendship.
You know, friendship is so important for every one of us. God created us to be very connected and relatable and needing one another. And sometimes your friendships with same-sex people look a lot different than they do with your wife or your husband. Gary, this past weekend, we talked to a couple, and they told us the most interesting story.
Well, and they were a little sheepish, and they were trying to figure out how to get into the story. But the woman said, you know, something got stirred in me recently. One of their kids plays sports. I think it's youth soccer. And they've been going to the soccer games, and sometimes the husband shows up to watch the kids, but the wife is always there. And as she was standing along the sidelines, you know, in week 2 and week 3 and week 4, she began to have some conversations with another one of the kids' dads. And it went from, you know, just kind of elevator talk and
shooting the breeze
and talking about what the kids were doing and kind of laughing and applauding.
Yeah.
But then she began to, as she explained to us in front of her husband, she began to kind of sense that some needs were being stirred, that she was kind of getting triggered. And then she said something, Barbie, that really got my attention and your attention. She said, you know, one day, and it was week 6, 7, 8, the other father didn't show up, and she was disappointed. And when she said she was disappointed, we said, you know what, that's a telltale sign that likely there's some chemistry going on that we need to pay attention to, because you've got a great need for connection and communication and friendship and just kind of interacting with your husband. But when some other guy is doing that and your heart sets in kind of a flutter, there is a risk. You know, and Barbie, what do you think?
Well, I think the key word is flutter, because even as she was standing there openly talking to us, Gary, I loved the openness. Her husband was nodding. He was in agreement. Mm-hmm. She learned something about herself, that anything can happen. I mean, she's not invincible. So it was just through words. It was from a man, a friendly man, paying attention to her. He was praising her for her accomplishments. And as we listened in, and we kept looking at the couple, because they were giving signals that their marriage was good, but they wanted it better. So I loved that we got to talk to him. But the reality is this, and I'm going to shoot to the bottom line because so many men want to know where we're going. Yeah. Your wife wants to have an affair of the heart with you. She doesn't want it with another guy. She doesn't want it with another man. She wants it with you. But oftentimes, a man did not take a class in how to relate to his wife before they got married, and he's still a little bit stumped by what that looks like. Well, today we want to talk about what you can do with your wife to build the best friendship in marriage, and for us as wives to understand what our husbands really need in growing a best friend.
Yeah, and you need to build that preemptively. So on the front end, early on in the relationship, because we're going to share here in a few moments an example of when some stuff was being tested in our own marriage relationship. I needed my best friend. But if I had not invested in you, Barbie, earlier in those friendship needs, then when I needed to draw on that reservoir, it wouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
You know, in Scripture, we read in Genesis 2:18, the Lord God said, it's not good for a man to be alone. I will make him a companion suitable for him. And that's our wife. You know, he created Adam, but he fashioned Eve out of something that already existed, and that was the rib of man. And so when a man has those friendship needs met, Barbie, you know, guys are used to kind of messing around, doing things alongside of each other, you know, playing sports, doing work projects, interacting, but maybe not saying a lot of words. but they just kind of know. And when we wear the same shirts to a party, we're thrilled because we think we're both cool. When girls wear the same shirts to a party, you're appalled because you think, oh no, I thought I had the only one. Is that right?
I don't know. I'm just listening to the story.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm just kind of making that up. But I know that when I'm validating you and you're validating me, that companionship and friendship needs are met.
They are. And you know what? I was thinking earlier, I wanted to make a list of the things you do right. How about that? And I'm going to tell everybody.
Do you need just a little stick-it note?
No,
or?
I got a long list right here.
You have a long list?
Yeah, are you ready? See?
Okay.
Okay. This is why I call you my best friend. Are you ready? You give me your undivided attention.
Yeah.
You do build me up, and you're very specific about those things you love about me. Now, guys, if you're listening, take notes, because this is what will make you not only an expert, but a winner in your wife's eyes. Gary Rosberg, you talk to me. And most important, you listen to me. You don't try to fix me. Now, we had to work through that. Maybe I need fixing. But the reality is, I can tell when you're holding my heart and you're with me. And you're experiencing the degree of emotion that I'm experiencing. Now, it might be in a different area, but I know that it's touching your heart. When I say that, what do you think?
I think who we talking about is what I think. Because, Barbara, I think I'm pretty good at fixing you and trying to do that because that's my inclination.
Yeah.
But it's good to know that those connections, those investments, those validations, those listening, that all builds something into the love bank, I think is what Gary Chapman calls it, that then when you need to draw on it, you're not living on just the interest, but you've got some principle in there that you can draw on.
We relate differently too. Years ago, I wrote in the 5 Love Needs of Men and Women that often a man wants a monologue and a woman wants a dialogue. So the way that I relate with my girlfriends, I'll start a sentence, question, a sentence, anything, a thought, and my dearest friends will finish the statement. Whereas in marriage, it's when I interrupt you, I think that throws you back a minute, because when a man is talking, and correct me if I'm not right here, it's my impression a man wants more of a monologue. It's a place to air your thoughts, to unpack things that you've been processing through. And if I break in and interrupt you, and I think I'm cheerleading, I think I'm praising you, I think you're the most wonderful man in the world on most days. But anyway, is it true that it can be abrasive in your thoughts?
It can interrupt.
Yeah.
Because if I, as a man, am trying to share something and download some information and some data and wanting to be heard, and I've got a line of thinking, and I'm finally opening up, and that's what a lot of guys listening to this podcast are saying, and I'm finally opening up, and then you begin to ask questions or cheerlead or tell me your own experience or something else. It's like, okay. Tell me when it's my turn again. And
this is good for me.
Well,
Thank you. This is really good.
Men do friendship differently. We do companionship differently. And there's sitcoms that display this on TV and everything else where, a guy can go camping with another guy for a whole weekend and come back and the wife goes, how are they doing? How's their marriage? I don't know. I didn't ask. How are their kids? I forgot to ask.
We went fishing.
Talking. Yeah, we were fishing. Just doing our own deal.
Yeah. Whereas in marriage, I'm going to talk about many of the women and those that are listening to us. We want emotional availability and we want emotional connection. And if we've had a good fill of that, we can just change the world. And we can love our children more and our grandchildren and our friendships. The world is beautiful when we have connected, not to another guy, not to another man, but to our husbands, because we want that affair of the heart with you.
So to that couple the other day at the conference, what we said was, what have you done to invest in the companionship and friendship needs so that her heart wasn't kind of getting fluttered by some other guy validating her? And they said, we just haven't been spending much time connecting, and we don't spend much time doing things together, and we don't have many mutual interests. And so he does his thing, she does her thing, but they just don't come together very often to do our thing. And friendship and companionship builds that. Barb, earlier I said, if you don't build it on the front end, then when the relationship gets tested, sometimes it gets a little wonky. And we write about this in the 5 love needs of men and women. But earlier in our marriage, and it's been many years ago.
25.
Yeah, my dad was facing heart surgery. And he hadn't accepted Christ. And I came to Christ when I was 21. You came to Christ you were 20?
19.
You were 19.
And for some that aren't familiar with that term, it's surrendering just every area of your heart, your mind, your soul, your spirit to the God who made you and the God who loves you and who can be trusted.
Yeah, and that was elusive to me. And then after several months of pushing back on that, I surrendered and I asked Jesus to become my Lord and my Savior. And he came into my heart and filled me with the power of the Spirit of God. And that was a game changer, completely changed everything. And I've never seen the world the same since. But it was almost immediately I was burdened for my own dad's salvation. And so I prayed for my dad for 21 years. And I would speak at events. I mean, I spoke at Promise Keepers to 65,000 guys in both Indianapolis and Dallas, where the Cowboys played and where the Colts played, to absolutely full, jam-packed arenas with guys turned away at the gate. So I'm talking, go to an NFL football game and imagine that the football field is full too. It's that many guys. And I would speak at those events and I would look out and in a weird way, I'd say, my dad, who may pass away, and if he doesn't capture this, and if this truth doesn't become known, it's like all these years of ministry seem in some ways to just kind of lose some of their sparkle or some of their depth for me. And so my dad's getting ready to have heart surgery. He hasn't made that decision. He's about 75 years old. And I contact him and he shares with me that he had surrendered his life to Christ and he had asked Christ to become his Lord and Savior. And Barb, I was blown away. And I remember the first thing I wanted to do was to tell you. And I remember calling you and you said, what's going on? And I said, I need to see you. I need to come home. Well, Gary, did something happen? I just need to see you because it was too big. It was too significant. It was too profound. It was too life-changing. It was too life-giving.
Yes, amazing.
For a son, after 21 years of praying this, to be able to share it. But I wanted to share it with my guy friends. Barbie, there's something in the core of a man that when we marry and we give our life to Christ and this biblical marriage and this covenant, and you take these two independent people and you weave us together into a sense of oneness, still separate, but never the same again. And you become one and you breathe life together and you experience it and you experience setbacks and frustrations and hurts. And then times like this, accomplishments, it's like you don't want to waste it on somebody else. Hey, you don't want to run out the door and go, this just happened. It's so special that you wanted to share it with your best friend. And so I remember I came home and I told you.
So what does a man need from his wife in that
Well,
moment?
I tell you what I got when I did. You were all in. You didn't interrupt me. You listened to me as I poured out my soul. You validated that this was the greatest experience that I could possibly imagine because it was at the core of my existence, my heart, because of all these years of fruitful ministry, but every time looking out going, but my dad, what about my dad? I mean, what if my dad doesn't make this decision? Will all this be good for everybody else's family, but not my own? And I think part of it is when you pour into a marriage relationship and you build the foundation and you learn how to be best friends and you develop that there's a sacred, holy protection around that you've got eyes for your spouse, guys. You got ears for your wife. You've got a tongue to share and to communicate. You've got a hand to put your arm around her. That when you draw her into the intimacy of that friendship, not only does that help you celebrate the good times, but it also helps you really walk through the times that it gets difficult.
I just want to kiss you.
Well, yeah, baby. Well, this is a pot. Now, there are some YouTube things that go up on social media, but, we could, make out a little bit. It would probably be okay.
So who's your best friend?
Sophie the dog, you mean? No, you are, Barbie. I mean, you are my best friend.
And you are mine. But I want to encourage everybody that it takes years of just trying to do the next right thing. It's a matter of resolving your differences as they come up. It's a matter of seeking to be a student of your mate. It means that you don't always understand, but you sure are trying. It means that you go to the foot of the cross and say, I can't do this without you. It really seems complicated. And then when you get the answered prayer that you prayed for in your marriage and the hindsight, and this is the key, I think it's when we look backwards and we see that every one of those movements that we call life and that we call marriage worked to build a storehouse of becoming reliable, trustworthy, and best friends through Christ.
So, Barbie, some of the guys are sitting back and the gals are sitting back saying, so what does a guy need? So I'm going to give 5 things that a guy needs in order for his wife to really be his best friend. Here's the first one. Ladies, have realistic expectations of your husband. Your husband is not one of your girlfriends, and you don't want him to be.
No.
And I think that's a big one. So have realistic expectations. He's not going to connect to you. He's not going to necessarily go into some of those places emotionally all the time. He needs to sometimes, but he's not readily going to go there. That's not likely his default. About 20% of the time, these get flip-flop with these roles, and guys are more emotional than their wives. But most of the time, our over 40 years of coaching couples and helping couples tells us that the guys are going to be more unique. So you need to have realistic expectations. Here's the second thing. He needs you. Barbie, I need you to speak the truth, but I need you to speak the truth in love.
That's really good.
Yeah, and we know that because the New Testament talks about speaking the truth in love. And, you know, Barbie, there are times where I'm getting vulnerable or I'm getting transparent and I'm opening something up and you speak truth and you do it really well. But if you aren't intentional to be more curious than critical, then a guy's going to shut down because we don't need that cymbal clanging. It gets murky for guys. So when guys are thinking, do I be transparent with my thoughts, vulnerable with my emotions? It gets murky for a man because it may be hard for him to open up. And so when he does open up, it's really important, you know, that you be more curious and critical.
I'd like to comment because I've been with couples over dinner or in small groups, and the wife will open up her mouth and criticism comes out.
Yeah.
And it hurts me for her husband, let alone the years and years and years of this for him. So we as women, when you open up your mind and your mouth, think of what is good and right and noble and really think on these things. Build your husband up.
The third thing is to develop a level of trust. And the best way to do that, Barbie, is for the woman to be confidential. And here's what we've learned with couples that we coach, is that when a guy goes there, so when a guy opens up his heart, he reveals what he's experiencing, he gets transparent and vulnerable. Many times the woman is receiving that and going, this is awesome. This is so awesome. I can't wait to call my mom. Or this is so awesome. I got to call my Bible study. Or this is so awesome. You know, I'm going to put it on the prayer chain at church, which we definitely aren't going to do. So when a guy goes there and then finds out, you know, at the next dinner gathering, or the next game, or the next, you know, whatever, that information was exposed, he'll clam up and he's not likely to communicate again. So don't let it be a death knell. If this has happened, clean it up, close the loop on it, you know, seek and grant the forgiveness and get a do-over. So it's not like, oh gosh, I've done that, we'll never get there. No, but you got to develop a level of trust. A guy needs to know, Barbie, that his wife is a vault.
And her husband's a vault.
And her husband's a vault.
And you can keep secrets.
Yeah. Here's number 4, is we need our wife to be forgiving. So when we don't do it perfectly, I heard one time that men are like hitmen, they're husbands in training. And we are kind of husbands in training, and I'm still in training after all these years. But I need you to be forgiving. I need you to exercise grace. I need you to be generous with that. Because if I mess up and I'm convicted of that and I confess that, and you are generous and gracious and forgiving, that's going to draw me closer to you and want me to try again. If I feel like I have to measure up to an expectation, then I feel inadequate and I feel like I'm not worthy enough. And that doesn't build a man up.
Or
criticism.
Isolate, yeah.
Well, we isolate. And when men isolate, they go subterranean. And when men go subterranean, we get stupid because we go underground. And men don't do good underground. Men need to stay above the ground in the light.
So if this is the dynamic in your marriage and you need your spouse to be more forgiving, to be more tenderhearted, to remember the grace that they received at the foot of the cross, you know, it's not that we're such great people in and of ourselves. It could be that you're well-intentioned, but if this element is missing in our marriages, just gently and lovingly pray together, and then both of you go back to the foot of the cross. Yeah. And remember those days, those early days, or as recently as 10 minutes ago, where we take our mistakes to the cross. We are reminded once again of our fresh faith, the forgiveness of sins, and the beauty of Christ when we hand over all of our darkness and our mistakes and our messiness. He gives us a transformed heart, transformed mind, and that's when we become more forgiving in our relationship and marriage.
And honey, I know you want to share some of the things that a wife needs for friendship needs, but let me give you the fifth one, the last one. A wife needs to enter her husband's world. So Barbie, who's my favorite baseball team?
Me? No, the Cubs.
Okay. Who's my favorite professional football game?
It's Wisconsin, and it's Cheeseheads.
Okay. Yeah, you sound like you're from a foreign country.
I know.
Yeah, they're the
Green Bay Packers.
Green Bay Packers.
There you
okay,
go.
It took a
there
little
you
bit.
Go.
But yes.
I know. I was thinking about, you want me to tell you what the women need, so I'm looking at my notes.
Yeah, so I'm a Packer fan. I'm a Cub fan.
Yes,
so
you are.
There
I
are
know
times
that.
when I'm watching the Packers in football season, or I'm watching the Cubs, as brokenhearted as I usually am in the baseball season, and that you'll come through that room, or you'll look at you'll look at what inning we're in or what quarter for football.
I ask you questions.
And you'll ask me a question, but sometimes you'll sit down and you just enter my world. And when I take like my grandsons to a Packers-Vikings game because they like the Vikings, or I take my Chicago grandsons to a Cubs game, I do that stuff because I love to enter their worlds and have them enter mine. And sometimes you'll come along and sometimes you won't, but you know that that's an important part of the friendship.
Yeah, it is.
And it builds the connection of friendship. And that's what that gal that came up to us last week and was talking about, was that she and her husband were busy. They were distracted. They weren't having date nights. They weren't spending time together, listening to each other and validating each other. So they left themselves somewhat vulnerable. And that gal was honest enough, and we're so proud of her, that she told her husband, because it allowed them, without condemnation, without criticism, without running for the hills, screaming from, like what's happened, but to just say, what do we do? And what we said is invest, invest, invest. So Barbie, what do the wives need?
Okay. I'm going to end with one big thing each man can do. Your wife is the expert in your marriage. So I want you to find 2 chairs that you sit in just to connect, just to talk. You might have a download of, what the calendar is, what your day was like. But when you can really get to the point of having the trust built, the reliability that you're going to make time on a daily basis to connect from those 2 chairs, I would love to see you gentlemen turn to your mate, lean forward and say, honey, I want to be the kind of husband where you can trust me to hold your heart and become your best friend. You might say, I need you, I want you, but I want you to need me. And then give her a moment of pause and say, how can I be your best friend? Yeah. And this is where gals, I just really want to encourage you to just take a good deep breath, because he's open. He's being transparent of thought and vulnerable with his heart. And any word or tone of voice could break him right now. Yeah. So if you want the more, then weigh your words. You don't need to have a lot of words. Choose your words with wisdom. This is what I would do. I would recount what he does well. Sweetheart, I love it when you clean up the table and you take the dishes in and wash them after a big meal I've made. That's what you do too.
Yeah.
I love it when you go to the grocery store and you bring home to me a bouquet of flowers. You understand my femininity. You understand how I love beauty. You do that well. I love how you want to understand me more. And I can give you more pause and think this through and give you direct information, maybe give me 24 hours. But the last thing I'd ask you or say is, be specific with what you tell your husband, because many women, we're mothers, we're wives, we know the next thing to do. We're wired with an incredible gift set. Your husband is too. But oftentimes, he doesn't know the next step because he's not a woman. He's a man.
Yeah, baby.
So we like to tell him with love and tenderness, be specific and tell him what he does well and what he did when you were dating. And that'll make him feel like a hero. Because remind him, he can do it. And guys, I'd like to say, it's not that hard.
Yeah, it's not that hard. It just takes those small moments, those intentional moments to build that part of your friendship. So we're talking about companionship and friendship and marriage. It's one of the top 5 love needs that we write about in the 5 love needs of men and women. You may want to take a gander at that. And we're so grateful that you're joining us for the Rosbergs, your marriage coaches, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Rosbergs, your marriage coaches, with Dr. Gary and Barbie Rosberg. To find out more, go to americasfamilycoaches.com. Once you're there, you can check out the many resources that they have available. From their many books to their informative video series, 6 Secrets to a Lasting Love, they've got all the tools you need to help you grow deeper in your relationship with your spouse and with God. Go to americasfamilycoaches.com and click on the Resources tab. Also, if you have a marriage question, you can call 855-ROSBERG and leave a message with your question. We may use your question on a future episode. We appreciate your prayers and support for this ministry. Find out how you can come alongside us when you go to americasfamilycoaches.com. Just search the top of the index for the Donate tab. Thank you for listening in today. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of The Rosbergs, your marriage coaches, with Gary and Barbie Rosberg.
Marriage, it can be challenging, it can be stressful, and it can be absolutely wonderful. If you and your spouse want to strengthen and enhance your marriage, Dr. Gary and Barbie Rosberg can help through a new video series, 6 Secrets to a Lasting Love. A strong and healthy marriage isn't just about feelings or emotions. It is truly 6 specific and intentional kinds of love. The Rosbergs offer this brand new study looking at the biblical loves and principles of a great marriage experience. This video series and accompanying workbook is rich with discussion and group questions designed for couples in one-on-one marriage coaching or in a small group study. Find out more at americasfamilycoaches.com.